Welcome to Priceless Takes.
And we are live from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome everyone to Priceless Takes, episode 68. I'm your host, Luka Price, and joining me today for the second time this week, I cannot remember the last time I recorded 2 episodes in a week, which is a very, very bad thing. I'm glad to be back for 2 episodes this week. Chris Malik joining me today. Chris, how you going?
Good, Luca. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, for those viewers, yes, since I have moved back home, the time to do episodes has not been as much as when I used to be in America. But there has been so much good football on and so much time that I have had to watch this good football that I have had all the time in the world to give you guys all of my predictions, along with the predictions that Chris has given us. This week, we have the divisional round. Chris, as a whole, what are you expecting from the divisional round this week?
Look, I think we have a lot of exciting matchups. We have a lot of interesting dynamics at play. And I think there's a couple teams out there that have a lot to play for and a lot of reputation and legacy on the line with especially the Ravens and Bills games.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is one of the best weekends of sport, Chris. We have the NFL divisional round, and we also have the college football that is being played on Monday night, which is Tuesday for the Australian viewers. More to come on that at the end of the show. But Chris, legacy. That is where I want to start with this first matchup. We're going to go back to front here when we talk about the divisional round. We're going to preview all 4 games, and the game that we're going to start off with is by far, in my opinion, and I think for most of the football world, whether that be analysts, whether that be fans' opinions, this divisional game in Buffalo, Ravens at Bills. Now, this is the second meeting between these two in the season this year. The second meeting also between these two in the playoffs. The first playoff game was also in Buffalo some years ago during COVID. This year, Baltimore routed the Bills 35-10 in the divisional round. And the story of that game, Derrick Henry, 199 yards on the ground. Effectively 200, absolutely dominated the game, while the Bills were held to 81 rushing yards for the entire game. Now, going into this game, Chris, the Bills have won 11 of 13. One of those 2 losses includes that Patriots game at the end of the season. So effectively, it's 11 out of 12. And the Ravens are going into this game on 5 straight wins, with Lamar leading the line as well as Derrick Henry. Lamar's got 60-plus rushing yards in 3 consecutive games, 81 last week. Now, the offense has been firing for the Ravens. The offense last week was firing for the Bills. Chris, the Ravens, 0.5 point favorites. I don't know how that line works, but I guess it works in the way it works. I don't know how you can pick a 0.5 line. I don't really think you can. And the other story, Chris, it's going to be cold, up to negative 20 degrees Celsius, Australian Celsius temperatures, and that could be about 0 Fahrenheit. So, Chris, what I want to know, who wins this game and what is the score, and what do you think is going to be the biggest factor that plays on this game?
Look, Luca, I think in this game you have 2 really, really well matched up teams. And I think just on basis of the home field advantage, I will be giving this game to the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be freezing, it's going to be loud, it's going to be intense, and I think that's all going to lead up to Lamar Jackson having a couple shaky moments, shall I put it that way. And I think it's gonna get into his head. It's not home field anymore. It's not M&T Bank Stadium, and I think that's gonna show up in his play. As for the score, I do think these 2 teams are gonna have a shootout. They don't have defenses to shrug at, but the sheer dynamism of both players is, I think they're gonna put it all out there. So I actually have a very close game at 35-32 to the Bills. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, listen, Chris, I've said it before, I've said it again. The Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl, and it starts here in the divisional round. Lamar's going to come to Buffalo and beat Josh Allen. Chris, I understand what you're saying with the home field advantage, but I saw Patrick Mahomes walk in there last year and beat Josh Allen in Buffalo. And you might be saying, well, yes, Lamar's not as good as Patrick Mahomes. Yes, I completely agree. But the year before, I saw Joe Burrow walk in to Buffalo and beat Josh Allen in the divisional round.
The difference between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes is they're proven playoff performers. the difference between Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes on one side, and Lamar Jackson on one side is those two are proven playoff performers, whereas Lamar Jackson really
Sure,
has not showed up in
sure.
the playoffs until last
Well,
week.
what I know is Derrick Henry is a proven playoff performer, Chris, and this is something I said last week and something I'm going to reiterate again. He is a proven playoff performer. This game is going to be cold, which what does that bode perfectly for? A team to run the football effectively. On the other side of the ball, the Ravens still have the number one rushing defense in the NFL. So it is going to be a struggle for Josh Allen, like it was in week 4, to run the ball in this game, in my opinion. Now, I think when it comes to Lamar, when it comes to Derrick Henry, Chris, I said to you, if Lamar is running the ball effectively, I think this Ravens team is practically unbeatable. We saw that last week with the 80 plus rushing yards. I think we're going to see a similar number again this week if we want the Ravens to win.
Luca, I think what it comes down to is it's pretty easy to tell that the Ravens are going to run the ball. And in that sense, it becomes really easy for the Bills defense, who are no slouches, might I add. It becomes really easy for the Bills defense to be like, all right, well, we know they're going to focus on the run. And if we get a little bit loud, we're going to have to force the Ravens into silent counts. And this is the thing with the home playoff advantage. These are very, very real factors. And I think that if you can, like I said, there are multiple pathways to victory for both teams. And if you can shut down those pathways, it increases your chance to win. And I think when it comes down to the Bills, they know how their home field operates, the lake chill effect. They're aware of how cold it gets. And I think in those situations, you have Josh Allen being an infinitely better passer than Lamar Jackson. And we also had some really weird comments coming from Jim Harbaugh a couple days ago, where he was explaining about the field and how cold it was and how they wanted to keep it warm inside because it was too cold outside to play. And it's like, are we being serious here? I mean, you're going to be playing in almost 0 Fahrenheit temperatures with some potential for snow. So I think, yeah, you do raise an excellent point about them running the ball, but at the same time, that could be their bane in reducing their ways to win.
Yeah, Chris, look, valid points. I will add though, Lamar Jackson in his career is 9-1 when he's playing under 0 degree temperature. I don't think the cold is going to play that much of a difference. You can say, oh well, it's going to be really, really,
How many of those games are in the
it's going to be
playoffs, though?
really, really cold. Okay,
How
yeah,
many
I
of
get
those
that,
games are in the playoffs?
but I
This is the
don't think
thing.
you can. I
Lamar
don't think you can. No, but
Jackson
you can't
is
just no, no,
Lamar
Chris, no, you
Jackson's
can't. I'm not
game.
gonna.
Lamar Jackson's game does not translate into the playoffs as much
I,
as we would like, and that's a proven fact. The first game that he's really shown up in the playoffs, in the sense that this is our normal Lamar, was last week.
Chris, we have been blessed to have quarterbacks in the NFL like Patrick Mahomes and like Joe Burrow that as soon as they get into the playoffs, they start playing amazing from the very beginning. That is not every single athlete, Chris. Some athletes need more time. Some athletes need more experience. We saw Josh Allen in his first ever playoff game choke on the road against
Lamar
Houston,
Jackson, Lamar,
and then he became good. Okay, Lamar Jackson hasn't. Look, he has played well in the playoffs as of late, okay? We had the one game, Kansas City. Okay, the divisional round, he played well against Houston. He played well in the wild card weekend. This week, okay, the season before that he was hurt, they didn't make the playoffs. And the season before that, he was only in his second or third season starting in the NFL. He was still a young player, Chris. We need to give Lamar Jackson more time, and we can't just say, oh, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you're never going to do it. This is the time. He has the best team he has ever had. He has had, in my opinion, the best season he has ever had. When you excluding the fact that he has won 2 MVPs, not to mention Josh Allen has already lost in this game three straight times.
You bring up an
This is the
excellent point there.
time, Chris.
Wait, hold on. You bring up an excellent point there. You say he's won 2 MVPs. I'm sure you can definitely make an argument that this year is going to be the year. But Lamar Jackson is the first 2-time MVP to not have a Super Bowl appearance or win.
Well, he's the only. He's
Right.
the only so far.
And it's
Okay, but
looking like,
Peyton Manning won 2 MVPs before he went to a Super Bowl.
I'm not exactly too sure. I think his second MVP came when he was in the Super Bowl. I'll have to check that though. Um,
We'll give fact check that later, but
we will fact check that
I'm
later.
pretty
But what I'm
sure.
saying is, Luca, it looks like Lamar Jackson is going into his third MVP season. That's frankly really what it looks like, coming off his All Pro nomination, I believe, this year. So what I'm trying to say is the amount of pressure on the shoulders of Lamar Jackson is higher than it's ever been. And of course, he's got Derrick Henry to relieve that. But what it comes down to is it's gonna be a marginal throwing game, definitely. But it's gonna be within those margins as who's gonna take it out. And the other thing is, I'm really shocked that they actually have the Ravens taking this game, the odds makers, for a couple of main reasons. I think that obviously the Bills' record is better. The Bills effectively have not lost for 3 months. They haven't lost a game for 3 months. It is home field advantage, and they're more used to the cold. And so most people are going to take this game as these games are really evenly matched up. Sorry, these teams are really evenly matched up. And in those sense, you would take the home game. So I think the odds makers are really have a really interesting point here. But if if Lamar wins another MVP and does not at least get to the Super Bowl in this year, it would be a really disappointing show. And I think all that pressure is on Lamar. He chokes this one here, and maybe he misses just a couple plays. The points at which these teams are, they're so evenly matched. You just similar to the Bucks and Commanders game we saw. One play could really tilt the position of the game. And I think that's where Josh Allen has that proven grit where he's come through in big moments or put up Herculean efforts to at least bring the game really, really close. I think
Yeah,
that
but
factor is going to really play here.
just because he plays well doesn't mean he always wins. And we've seen Josh Allen's best playoff games have come in losses. That is literally the thing we talk
Exactly.
about with Josh Allen. He hasn't had those playoff moments in wins. They have only come in losses, Chris.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think this is likely, in my opinion, going to be another one of those games because I don't think that these rosters are as evenly matched as what you're saying. I think that Josh Allen makes up for a lot of these teams' flaws and for a lot of the names on this roster. And when you look at the Ravens from top to bottom, they are a better team than the Bills. And I think that this is something that in the playoffs, particularly when it comes to the rushing attack, is going to show. I understand what you're saying with, oh, we know that they're going to run the ball. But I think this Ravens team is that dynamic where we know they're going to run the ball, but they're still going to run the ball. And I don't think there's going to be much that the Bills are actually going to be able to do about it. Now, that's something we're going to have to wait and see when it actually comes to the game. But I think that it's one thing stopping Derrick Henry, okay? We've seen Derrick
Hmm.
Henry
Hmm.
being neutralized before in the playoffs. Now,
Hmm.
one of the fascinating things that I only found out this week is Derrick Henry's average for the playoffs is 100 yards, but he's never actually had a playoff game where he's had in between 70 yards or 150 yards, Chris. He's either had 70 or below or 150 and
Look,
more.
I
That's
think a
why that
lot.
average is
Look,
so fascinating.
I think a lot of that has to do with him being on underwhelming teams.
Exactly, exactly.
And
You're correct.
so his usage rates are really high. It's kind of like Allen Iverson on the early 2000s. His points were insane, but his usage rate was also equally insane. That doesn't take away from his abilities, but I'm saying that Derrick Henry's stats could be slightly inflated simply because he was the go-to option and you were passing it to him. And there were a lot of times in his last seasons with the Titans where it was very common for them to just not in playoff games, but in regular season games to just run the ball 30 times a game, and that was their go-to. So I think he does put up excellent points during the playoffs, but I think it's a different game when you've got that extra factor in Lamar Jackson. And obviously we've seen that play off dynamically, but in those I really felt like the pressure has not been on Lamar Jackson that highly this season because they sort of knew they're going to make the playoffs regardless. And so it's sort of that a bit of that Chiefs magic where they're like, our season doesn't really start until the postseason. I think the only moment where the pressure really came on was when they played the Eagles. They took that loss and they were going into the bye, and Lamar said that I'm really pissed now. And I think if he can harness some of that energy, sure. But I just think that it's going to be too loud, too cold. Uh, you know, I don't think you can discount these things. And you did bring up that the Bills lost the last three games at home. I'm pretty
Last two.
sure. Lost two.
Last
I'm
two
pretty.
playoff games, last two divisional playoff games at home.
Yep, yep. I do think the last year they lost off a kick with the Lake Chill effect when the ball just kind of swung. So I think that's going to be a factor. But I think at the end of the day, I really do believe Josh Allen's going to pull through as a one-man show and show up those heroics. But I also want to put this question to you. If the Bills were to win, what would you place as the most important factor? What who would need to show up?
The Bill, I can see this game being like Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes divisional like playoff at like that
Mm-hmm.
game. The game
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about. I could see
Yeah,
that
yeah.
game being something like this. I think that, in my opinion, I think Lamar is going to play well regardless win or loss. I have seen things in
So
Lamar,
you
and
you think you
I
think
I
you think
believe
Lamar's ghosts are gone? His playoff ghosts are gone.
as not compl- well. Listen, if he plays Mahomes, I still think they beat Mahomes if they get to the championship game. But I think right now, at this moment in time, going into this game, I am confident in Lamar Jackson's ability to play well in the playoffs. As of right now, I do not think he is going to be the reason that the Ravens lose this game. If the Ravens lose this game, I think it's because they lose in a shootout. Okay, that is really how I
Okay.
see the Ravens losing this game. Also, to correct before, Peyton Manning did win two MVPs in '03 and '04. He reached his first Super Bowl in 2007. I thought I was right, as always, but just to clarify that point,
Okay.
Chris. So
No,
Lamar
you were
isn't
right.
the only one. But I just think that this Ravens team poses too
Sorry,
many
sorry.
problems for the Bills.
I want to rephrase that stat. I think it's the only person who's won two Super Bowls and gotten two rings and not won a Super Bowl yet. Because
Yes,
at that point in
yes.
his career, Peyton Manning still had a lot of question marks after those seasons, the 2003, 2004 seasons, whether he was going to show up in the playoffs because he had a lot of one and dones.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No.
what I meant by that. Sorry, apologies.
No, 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 no. You're all good. The other thing is, Chris, and I don't know how much you've looked into this, but the Bills' defense as a whole is also actually quite small, and the Ravens' offense has a lot
Yes,
of big boys on it. And that's
I've
something
noticed
as
that. Yep.
well, when I look at running the football, that I think that physically, I think the Ravens can just overpower the Bills. And I guess my other question to you is, I sort of I rebutted this, but if these teams are so even, why did the Ravens absolutely destroy them in week four? What went into that game?
Look, I think Week 4 was a bit of a different beast. I think this Bills team didn't really have its identity. I think they're riding a bit of a high on the last couple months, and I think importantly, you've seen Josh Allen really come into his own. You didn't really have him in the MVP conversation towards the first couple of weeks. It was a bit shaky. We had a lot of questionable things going on. But I think it was a bit of a dead offensive game in that as well. I think they had very few catches and very few yards on the Bills end. I mean, I'll have to check that, but um, I think it was definitely a Derrick Henry game. I do know that Derrick Henry did fumble a touchdown. He would have had three. So
Yeah,
I don't really take that game into much seriousness. It's too far away. It's too far gone. And I think that if anything, the Bills knew that they were going to beat the Broncos, and so they were preparing for a potential this matchup for a little while. And I think they would have been studying this film to see where to improve. I think it's possible that the Ravens took it a bit lackadaisically. They probably took it, a bit unseriously, considering that they did smash him by 25. But you have to remember the Ravens were fighting to get to even. I'm pretty sure they started the season 0-2, and so those two games were really crucial.
yeah.
But I honestly I just think it's too far back. That's the way I look at it. Week 4 is
And
too long ago.
yeah, my other question, Chris, is last week the Bills gave up 10.8 yards per carry to Bo Nix. Does that
hmm
concern you at all when you look at how effectively Lamar runs the football?
Look, I did not watch the entire film, but I do know that Sean Payton is more. I would say he draws better, more unique plays than Jim Harbaugh. I think Jim Harbaugh is a bit of a questionable play caller in the playoffs. I mean, he's won a Super Bowl, but there have been moments where apologies, he's won a Super Bowl, but there have been moments in the previous playoff games where they just haven't run the ball, and they've try and pass too much. So I think I'm not exactly concerned, but I do think that there's a bit of a offensive genius going on there. And we do know how Sean Payton, how good he is at bringing out the best in his quarterbacks. So I think that's a bit of a different dynamic with regards to that. I'm
Yeah.
looking at the
Well,
running backs in that game didn't get
Harbaugh,
cooking as well.
yeah, Harbaugh also isn't like their offensive coordinator for the longest times has like they drive the offense's engine. Harbaugh, I'm pretty sure, came in as a special teams coordinator from your Eagles. And then
Yeah,
he might
yeah,
have been, I think, a defensive coach before he got to the Ravens. I think
yeah.
to the offense is mainly Todd Monken, and it's his second season. And we saw last season where they got away from the run, okay, and that's in my opinion what cost them against the Chiefs. But
Exactly, exactly.
this is why I can't agree with your opinion that Lamar Jackson's playoff woes because he's never had someone as good as Derrick Henry before, and
That is
it
true.
allows them to play free-flowing football when both of them are running the ball effectively. And I just think that I don't think the Bills can stop Lamar or Derrick Henry. They can't stop both of them. I think something has to give way in this game. I don't think Buffalo is going to completely stop the Ravens' run game and force
Exactly.
Lamar into
I
throwing the
I
football.
I completely believe that's true. Like you said before about a shootout, I think it's going to be a very similar scenario in which it's like, okay, we can't stop you completely. We'll let you do one aspect of it, but we're really gonna get the football down and get some good drives. I think Zay Flowers not being in the game is also a big. It's a big factor.
Well, he's not out yet. He is doubtful. There is a
I mean, he's
chance.
missed 5 straight practices.
I
So,
don't think. I honestly do not think Lamar needs A Flowers for this game. Like he would help.
so
Like
Luca,
he's
Luca,
number one receiver.
if you were
I
the odds
think
maker, what would you put the line at?
right now
Yeah, because you seem pretty confident on the Ravens.
I'm very confident because I'm telling you the team when I tell you this every week I look at a team that's peaking at the right time. I think Lamar is almost playing in like a mode where he is just locked in. He knows what he has to do to
I
win the
I,
games.
I think that's the
I
beauty
would
of the
give
Bills as well. They're peaking as
I
well.
would give the Bills a point and a half because I think home field advantage is important when it comes to odds. I don't
Yeah.
think in terms of my analysis of the game it stays the same, but when it comes to home field advantage, I think the home field when it's a close-ish playoff game, I think the home team should be favored.
Okay.
So
Well,
I would actually give the Bills a point, but I even if the Bills had a point, I still think the Ravens win this game.
okay, fair. All right. Well, where do you put the score at?
The score, I said when I see the Ravens losing, I think they can only really lose in a shootout, but I have them winning. I don't have this quite as high scoring as you
Hmm.
because I think the majority of this game is going to be played on the ground. I think at some point later in the game, most likely, the passing attacks from both teams will get opened up. I had this game 28-25 to the
Okay.
Ravens. So still
Okay.
a high
It's still
scoring
3 point
game.
margin. Still 3 point
Yeah,
margin. It's
yeah,
gonna be
I
a
think
close
it's going to
game.
be close. Oh yeah, I have no doubt this game's going to be close. Josh Allen, despite his shortcomings, he does play well in the playoffs. But I think this is going to be another hitting the old hammer where Josh Allen has a good game and still manages to lose in the
And Luca,
divisional round.
Luca, another factor to note is Josh Allen's operating behind the second best defensive line behind my Eagles
Yes,
this year.
yes, which the
So
Broncos
we
still
see.
did get some good pressure on
Yep,
in
yep.
last week.
I'm
They
sure.
still got some pressure on him.
It's just to neutralize Josh Allen. You. I mean, the weather is gonna help, but then again, he's used to it, so it might help him.
Yeah,
I'm
but I know,
those
but
kind of
I
things.
think
We'll,
we
we'll
talk
find
about
out
the
when the game
cold,
begins.
but Lamar's not Tua, okay? Like Baltimore is not like sunshine and rainbows. Like Baltimore gets cold, like they
It
get
does.
cold, and
It
I
does. It
understand,
does.
like I
Close
know
to the
what you're
water as
saying with
well.
the
Yep.
indoor thing, but I think Lamar right now, I think he is in a zone, okay? And the other thing
Yep.
as well, I think Lamar he and this may be what you will argue might work for your argument. I don't know what Lamar's thinking, but from the outside looking in, I think there is so much more pressure on Lamar to win this game than there is on Josh Allen.
Exactly. exactly. And
That's just me.
if you want to just briefly talk about reputations and legacies on the line, if Josh wins this, he breaks the curse of not going anywhere in the playoffs, and he probably
Well,
has a
no, I disagree with that because I think he's already done that. But I think it's more
no,
important for
but
Lamar because Josh Allen. A lot of people picked Josh Allen to miss the playoffs this year. Like,
yeah.
like
But what I was getting to is, obviously he had that 13-second game,
yeah,
and that's really made his reputation in terms of a performer. That's when we really saw him like, okay, the Bills are going to be a real team. But he's had the unlucky fortune of being in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow is the only one who's gotten there. And so I think what it's going to come down to is who really wants it more in terms of who's gonna patch their not patch but solidify their irons. If Lamar doesn't win, he wins three MVPs and does not get anywhere near the Super Bowl. Once again, goes to people's points that he's not a playoff performer. And even if he has a Herculean season next year, the voters just won't give it to him. If Josh Allen wins, he has a chance to go against Patrick Mahomes, and I think he will win. I think he will beat Patrick Mahomes and finally get to that hallowed point of playing in the Super Bowl. So I think there's a lot to play for. I think it's going to be a really exciting game, and I think we should watch this game really closely because
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm
because we both have the winner of this going to the Super Bowl, correct?
correct. Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm not convinced Lamar's going to win the MVP, but I think if what you're saying is correct, then yes, it would be a disaster if Lamar wins MVP and loses this game.
Yep.
But I think just because of the expectations, I think that, look, if the Bills lose this game, I think you can say, well, listen, yes, we've lost three straight divisional round playoff games at home, but you look at the team we lost to, they have a dynamic offense. They are a team that has been trying to also break through for several years. We came into this season with not a lot of expectations, and we had the MVP, potential MVP of the league, and we got to a spot where maybe some people in the organization didn't even think they could get to at the start of the season. And I think there's a lot of room to work with for the Bills. Whereas if the Ravens don't win with this team, with one of the best running backs the best running back of this generation in Derrick Henry, with a defense that was shaky to start the season, but has really come on at the end, and a quarterback that has won his third MVP. Like, where do you go from the Ravens? Like, do you just run it back again? At some point, there's going to be some serious head noise for this team, more so than there is already. And I think Baltimore's prepared, and I think it's finally clicked for them, Chris. I think it finally has. I have them taken out the game. Final words before we move on to your Eagles.
I think not much more to add. I think it's going to be a really exciting game, and I think we really need to watch this game closely because if my Eagles get to the Super Bowl, I think they're going to have issues with both teams.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. And on those Eagles, they host the Rams, and another game which we've seen a second time this season where the Eagles dominated in Week 12 in LA. They won by 17 points. Saquon hit 255 rushing yards. He also had over 300 scrimmage yards in this game. Hurts threw for just under 180 yards and a touchdown. Stafford threw for 243 and a touchdown. Nakua and AJ Brown both had 100 yards each. Now, you can also make the same argument, not as long as Week 4, but Week 12 also does feel like a long time ago, especially when I think where I was watching this game, it feels like a long time ago. Chris, what do you see coming into this game? You said in the last episode we did you had some concerns about your Eagles offense. The Rams had a pretty solid offensive performance in the wildcard weekend. What are your score predictions for this game?
I'm going to be going with the Eagles 21-17. So, yeah, that's my score predictions. I mean, I have it as pretty close. I think the Rams have a good playoff medal, and so do the Eagles. But I think that Matt Stafford, he's been in the quarterback position, especially in these high pressure moments, plenty of times, and I think that's going to show. I think that they can really, if they can get Saquon going, it's pretty much a done game. I don't want to see those offensive struggles come through, but if they do come through, I still think against the Rams, you still have time to iron those out. I don't think obviously the NFC is not as strong as the AFC, so I think the divisional rounds here are not exactly as exciting as the AFC. But yeah, I've got the Eagles 21-17.
I want to ask you, Chris, you talked about in our last game about how for the Bills defense, you know that the Ravens are going to run the ball, and
Mm-hmm.
that gives an advantage to the Bills when game
Mm-hmm.
planning. What do you think in this game? And I think, in my opinion, Sean McVay is one of the best game planners in the NFL. What do you
Yeah.
think for this game with knowing if the Eagles are going to run the ball? Saquon had 250 plus rushing yards the last time we played these guys. What do you think? How does that work for this game?
Look, I don't know. This is the thing. I don't know if you know that the Eagles are going to predominantly run the ball. This is the really scary part about what you have in the garage when you got AJ Brown, you've got Saquon Barkley and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert. That's a really scary part. So I think it's very possible that the Eagles just hunker down and just send Saquon on wave after wave of run. But I do think that despite having a lot of pressure with Fisk and Verse and all these guys on the Rams defensive line, the Eagles, Jalen Hurts is playing behind the best offensive line, right? He's just had a game where he hasn't really thrown the ball, but a lot of people gave last time a lot of people gave him flack for not throwing the ball. What happened? He threw for almost 300 and a couple touchdowns, or might have been three touchdowns, on the Steelers, which are a good defensive team. So I think there's a bit of a dual threat going on here. And I think Sean McVay is a great offensive mind. I'm not exactly sure about the defensive coordinator for the Rams, but I know they were able to get a lot of pressure last game on the Vikings and shut them down. So I think essentially what it comes down to is they really need to they need to shut down Saquon, but they can't bank on that being the only game plan for the Eagles.
Yeah, well, Chris Schuler, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, they did just come off a nine-sack game. And if
Hmm.
I'm Jalen Hurts, I understand my offensive line is good, but I don't know. Does that worry Jalen Hurts a little bit when you see that he's had a concussion recently and that's the injury that's hampered him just before? I think, Chris, I don't really agree with you. I think that the Eagles have to run the ball to win, especially in the beginning. Because Jalen Hurts, he only had 131 pass yards last week. I don't think you can just sit back and just say, well, we have lots of tools in the garage, but if the person who's using the
But
tools
Luca,
can't perform,
they
then they're
didn't
going to
need
have to
to.
run the ball.
They didn't need to possible. Would I have preferred that they did possible? Sure. I don't think I think it was possibly one of Jalen's worst games throughout the entire
Yes.
season. I don't think he's gonna regress to that though. He's gonna come back to the mean, which is a decent pass game and a couple touchdowns. Which if you look at his numbers, he's averaging 8 yards per attempt. That's third in the league. He's not a bad passer. It's just that he just doesn't pass as much.
This is the thing that scares. There's two things that scare me if I'm Philadelphia. Okay.
Right, go on.
The Rams last week, okay. Pressure percentage on Sam Darnold, 52%. Okay. Blitz percentage, 19%. They sacked him 9 times. Okay. So the amount of times they got pressure compared to the amount of times they blitzed, they were able to rush with four and get home with four so effectively. And I mentioned this when we talked about Minnesota Rams. Sam Darnold half the time didn't even have options down the field to throw the ball to because the Rams are able to get home quick and they were able to get home effectively with Sam Darnold. Now, I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is as bad as Sam Darnold, but if the Rams are able to get home with four, albeit I do believe in this Eagles offensive line a lot more than I do in than I did believe in the Vikings offensive line. I think that that's going to be a problem if they can get pressure early. But the second thing that I have a problem with, Chris, and this is the thing that I mostly have a problem with, and something that you didn't mention last week, is the Eagles were
Hmm.
1 for 4 in the red zone against the Packers
Yeah.
last week. That's something that needs to change because I think if you go 1 for 4 in the red zone again this week, I actually think you will lose this game. That's just what I think. I maybe not certainly, but that's what I think. I think the
But
Eagles.
look, this is
I
the thing.
don't think they can
The
afford to
Packers,
settle for field goals in this
the
game.
Packers played a really, really good defensive game, despite the struggles of Jalen Hurts. They played a really, really good defensive game. they locked him down. And what I'm saying is, I'm saying that if Jordan Love in that game throws a couple touchdowns instead of interceptions, it's a very real possibility my boys are going home to Cancun, right? So a lot of things happened that needed to happen for the game to look like it wasn't that well. But I'm saying that if the Eagles just play their average game that they were playing the entire season, the Rams don't stand a chance. And you might discount week 12 as as far away. I don't think it's that far away. It's only a month, right? Only a couple games. And I think in that Saquon was a very real threat. And if they come out and say, okay, we need to shut down Saquon, then AJ Brown's due for a good game. He's due for a big game. He's only come off one catch last game. So I don't know. It's a really complex equation for the Rams to go upon. But I'm also looking that the Eagles' defense is peaking. The Eagles' defense is getting hot at the right time. Now, granted,
Even with Nakobe Dean out?
I do. That is a huge blow, and I think he might even be out well into the 2025 season. So I wish Nakobe Dean a good recovery, a speedy and full recovery. But I do think they have enough depth on the defensive line. You've got people like Quinyon Mitchell, who is kind of a safety, kind of a cornerback. He's in between both positions, and they can help on that defensive back position. So I think they have enough decent depth on the defensive line, but Nakobe Dean's a big loss. I know that him and Zach Bond were the leading tacklers for the Eagles.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, listen, a lot of these questions I have, mainly because I want to hear your thoughts. I tossed and turned over this game for quite some time because I really like this Rams team, and I think with a 1-2 punch of McVay and Stafford, they're 5-1 in the playoffs. But Chris, this pick for me is purely gut feel, and I think that the Eagles, are going to pull this one out. And I really wanted to debate this with you more and pick the Rams for the upset. I have the Eagles 24-20 in a close game, and I really don't have a lot of stats to back it up. I think the Eagles are just a better team. And I think the home field advantage, is going to impact this too. And I think that's all I can really pin it down to. So it's just,
Luka.
Yes.
Yeah, like I was mentioning last episode, a lot of the top flight teams, they did not show apart from maybe the Lions, they didn't show their whole bag of tricks, not only trick plays, but their whole arsenal throughout the season. And I think a lot of it is on potential. It's just how high can the Eagles fly? That's what it comes down to, is how high. And I think the Rams, given their playoff reputation, they can come up big in really, really bright spots. And that's a really scary factor. So I understand why you're saying that there's some potential there, upset potential. But I do think the Eagles will win 21-17.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm giving them 24-20. I'm picking them, with not a lot of confidence, to be honest with you. But I want them to win, because Eagles-Lions championship game, I think, would be great. As would also, to be fair, a Rams-Lions championship game rematch. Like, that would also be pretty epic too, for a chance for, Stafford or Goff to go to the Super Bowl. But, yeah, the Eagles. But, Chris, you asked me last week, what's the one game you can see in an upset? And I said last week, Houston, I got that one right. This week, this is the game that I think, if there were to be an upset, I think it would be this game with the Rams. Because a part of me still really isn't sure about Jalen Hurts. I do believe in him, but I still have some question marks. But I think this is the week where I think Jalen Hurts, can have a really strong performance. And if they do win, that will have a lot of people thinking differently about this team heading into what I think will be a championship game against Detroit.
Yep.
Moving on, back to the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time reigning defending Super Bowl champions, host the young Houston Texans. Kansas City, Chris, all they do is win, and in the playoffs, Chris, for the most part, all they do is dominate. They have 10 straight wins at Arrowhead up until this point. They're 8-0 at
Yep.
home this season. They only versed the Texans some weeks ago. They won 27-19 in the game where CJ Stroud threw 2 interceptions. Mahomes, Chris, this is a tale of two teams. 6-0 in the divisional round, Mahomes is, and the Texans, as a franchise, are 0-5 in the divisional round. 8.5 point favourites are the Chiefs, 8.5 point favourites. Chris, what is the score and who do you have winning? Do you think the Texans can give the Chiefs a run for their money? And if so, how do they do it?
Luka, I have the Texans getting blown out of the water.
Blown out! Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
have the Chiefs 27-7. I don't
Wow.
think the Chiefs are not in this game. Andy Reid is too deadly off a bye. There's literally no potential. CJ Stroud
32-7. Yeah.
32-7. He's too good. That's that's ridiculous, basically. In the Chiefs era, all they've done is dominate. Too much firepower. The defense is too good. Chris Jones is too good. I don't think there's no way Texans give a chance of an upset. They're going into Kansas. It's gonna be cold. It's gonna be loud. CJ Stroud's gonna choke. Sophomore slump. I don't give him any chance at all. At all. And I think this sense of the Chiefs have been waiting for this moment in terms of the divisional round, the AFC Championship, and then Super Bowl. I think that's a very real thing. I think that's what they've been looking for this entire year. They can win from behind. They can win from in front. They can win from literally anywhere. And I don't think the Chiefs, the Texans have any ways to win. I mean, Joe Mixon, who is important, has some mystery injury. He was present at practice and then he didn't show up. So I don't think they have a chance in hell, basically.
Yeah, Joe Mixon does seem to have some ghost injury. Yeah, he wasn't in practice today. He was limited in practice the day before, and nothing happened with his status post wildcard weekend against the Chargers. So that is something to watch. He also did only have 57 yards against the Chiefs last time, and the Chiefs are second in the NBA, the NFL, in running back yards allowed at 3.8 yards per carry. They're also the fourth best scoring defense in the NFL. They're young, they're hungry, they're motivated, they have the pedigree. I do not see a scenario as well where the Texans win this game. That's sort of... Okay, sorry. I do not think the Texans will win this game. The only way they can win this game, Chris, and there is one tiny scenario, is if CJ Stroud can make plays outside of the pocket. And that is the only way I think the Texans can win this game.
But even then, it would be a very weird scenario because he'd be being pressured by Chris Jones to leave the pocket. And then on
that's what, yes.
And the only person he'd pass to is Nico Collins, and obviously the team's gonna read that. There's no one else to pass to in terms of a solid. I mean, Dalton Schultz deep, it's not happening.
Well, out of all the positions the Chiefs were, like, the defense was worst against, it was the tight end spot. So if there is anyone that is going to be that second option, it is going to be Schultz. And you never know. Like, we saw De'Ami Brown last week for the Commanders just pop out of nowhere, have a big game. If the Texans are to compete, you never know. We could see Xavier Hutchinson had that big play in the wildcard weekend. Robert Woods might come out of nowhere, the seasoned vet. John Mechie, someone who also is a younger receiver who, could have an impact. I don't think these are going to happen, but I'm just telling you, if the Texans are to have any chance, I agree with you. I think also the Texans' interior offensive line is horrendous. I think CJ, Chris Jones, the other CJ, is going to just absolutely annihilate them, along with the other pass rushers that Kansas City has to offer, which is why I'm saying if the Texans are to have any chance, it's going to have to be what we saw from CJ the majority of last season, which is his ability to get out of the pocket and find players down the field. I still don't give him a chance, to be honest with you. I think Kansas City also covers the 8.5. I give this a bit of a closer game than you do. I'm giving Excuse me, I'm going 30-17 Kansas City.
Yeah,
So I'm not giving
but Luca,
not quite the 20
where
points you have.
where are the Texans gonna get the points? The way I see it is the Chiefs come out, they do what they need to do to get a big lead, and then they just relax.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this will be probably I think it's going to be a 10-point halftime 10 point. They'll probably be up by 10 points at halftime, I presume. And I think that the Texans will try fight back in the second half. But I'm going to give CJ a little bit of credit. Like he put 19 on them last time. It was 27-19, so he did it once. I get it's the playoffs, but CJ also didn't have a great game last time around. So I would hope that CJ maybe got a bit of a spark from last week's game, like a bit of self-confidence. We can actually do this. And I think that he will play better, but I think the Chiefs off a bye, like you said, they are too good off a bye. They've had too much time to prepare. They're gonna be rested. They're gonna be fired up. They're gonna be ready to go. But
Exactly.
I'm gonna give the Texans a bit more credit than you're giving them. I think they can put up just a little bit more of a fight. Um, yeah. I have another question, Chris.
Go on.
If you are Kansas City, going back
Mm-hmm.
to our previous game,
Right.
do you want to face Buffalo or do you want to face Baltimore in the AFC
Baltimore,
Championship game? You want to face Baltimore.
100,000%. I've already played Josh Allen. I haven't won. I know that if I can get Lamar Jackson into the Arrowhead Invitational, as some members of the media put it, if I can get Lamar Jackson there and I can put enough pressure on him, I can get the crowd going, I can get the crowd screaming, and it's also a matter of just morale. It's like, okay, we have Patrick Mahomes' record against Lamar Jackson's record, and these are very real things that sit in players' heads. I mean, you have a guy coming off a back-to-back Super Bowl championship, and on the other hand, you have a guy who has two MVPs, but nothing in the playoffs to show for it. So those are very real factors. I don't want Josh Allen. I of the three quarterbacks in the not in the playoffs, of the three quarterbacks in the AFC, I do not want Joe Burrow against, if I'm the Chiefs. I do not want Buffalo Bills, and I would like the Baltimore Ravens out of those three.
Yeah. I actually, despite me having the Ravens beating the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, from the Chiefs' perspective, I actually would rather Lamar as well.
Exactly. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, I would actually rather Lamar as well, just because Josh Allen has actually proven he can play well against the Chiefs in the playoffs.
I think
And
the
Lamar
simple fact that
hasn't
he can
proven
keep
that
up,
yet.
the fact that he can
Keyword
keep
being
up
yet.
yet, but the fact that Josh Allen has shown that he can keep up and keep the game close, which is really unlike what Patrick Mahomes is used to. Pat Mahomes doesn't win by too much. I mean, it's very rare for Mahomes to win by double digits. Or sorry, two scores. Very rare for him to win by two scores. But it's more common for the game to be extremely close if it's a worthy opponent. And I think Josh Allen provides that. I just haven't seen it from the Ravens.
Yeah.
And, we saw a bit of that in the opening game.
Yeah, fair enough, Chris. Listen, on that note, we're going to move to the other one seed who's playing this weekend. The Commanders and Jaden Daniels, the new cool kid on the block, travel to Detroit to face the Lions and that prolific offense. Now, Chris, this is a game that I like, okay? I love it in the playoffs when we see two teams meet for the first time because you really just go, look, they haven't played against each other. You're not like, oh, well, this happened in the previous game, so this will happen again, or, this won't happen because it happened in the previous game. You just look at these two teams and you're just like, okay, what do these teams offer? Who is going to win? Who is better? I really like a game where two teams haven't burst each other in the regular season. Now, Detroit, 31 plus points last 5 games, third in the league in rushing, Washington 30th in the league in running back yards per carry this season. They averaged 4.5 yards per carry to Bucky Irving last week, but he only mustered 77 yards on the ground. Obviously, Chris, you love this Lions rushing attack. I'll let you talk about that a bit more when I throw it over to you. The Washington Commanders 6-3 on the road. Detroit are 7-2 at home. Both teams are top 5 offenses. We've seen what Jaden Daniels did last week. He won a playoff game on the road. Only 3 other rookie quarterbacks to do so. Still, Lions 8.5 point favorites. Chris, who wins? What is the score in this game, and how do you see this one unfolding?
I think the line is way too short. I don't think it should be 8.5. I think it's interesting that they've done that, considering Detroit um, just doesn't have their guys on defense, and that's shown up in a couple games where Ben Campbell, the leader that he is, has not put faith in his defense. He'd rather go out there and try and score instead of relying on their defense to come up with a stop. And you know what? That's perfectly fair. But I think in that situation, this is where the Commanders thrive. The Commanders love getting the ball downfield. Jaden Daniels loves running with the ball. He loves going third and fourth down, or Dan Quinn does. And I think it's a very real scenario where you just have a shootout. And in shootouts, it's either way. It's whoever gets the ball last and scores last. So I think the line's way too short. Despite that, I do think Detroit is just simply the better team. Do I see a scenario in which Jaden Daniels has a perfect game and pulls off an upset? Sure. But those games have been very rare in general and very rare this season. Jaden Daniels has done it at an unproportionately high rate. But I think if Jared Goff goes out there and he just does what he usually does, he's Jared Goff. He facilitates. Doesn't have to be a Superman, but just gets the ball downfield. I think the Lions have this.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the Detroit defense, Chris, because they were one of the top defenses in the NFL to start the season, and then all the injuries happened. They fell off. Before the Minnesota game, they had allowed 32.5 points per game on average, and to some quality opponents too, like the Commanders also are, especially when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. We see them first, Sam Darnold. They only allowed 9 points, and now there's a bit of discussion going on. Well, did Sam Darnold just go pumpkin mode and Detroit benefited from this? Or have the Lions defense, have they found some of that early season momentum going into this game? Do you think that the Detroit defense, it was a fluke performance against Minnesota, or do you think they are back to their early season form?
I think the Vikings did what everyone thought they were gonna do. They were gonna choke. I don't think anyone really thought, except maybe three Vikings fans in Minnesota, thought that they were actually gonna go somewhere. I think that's a big factor. I do think that the Lions have that mentality where they can switch it on and switch it off, and that really is powered off behind Dan Campbell. But it must be noted, Dan Campbell is one. It's not a big sample size, but he's 1-1-1 off a bye. And I think that has a lot to do with the preparation. Now, do I think that it's? I actually think it's probably better that the Commanders aren't playing off a bye. I think it keeps them active and going, because in those scenarios they don't have the personnel to sit back and relax. They have to keep going, going, going. I think there's a very real threat where Detroit shows up. They're a bit fired up, but they probably think they're severely overmatched, and on paper they really are. And I think the Commanders could really take advantage of that and seize on that opportunity and get a couple quick buckets up to start with. Buckets as in, field goals.
Yeah.
But I do know that in the Commanders and Eagles game, they definitely gave the Eagles a run for the money. Even when Jalen Hurts was not in and Kenny Pickett was out there, he was still getting the ball downfield. He did not play a horrible game, and they were still able to put points up. But I think a really crucial point is the last 5 games that the Commanders have won have come in the last minute or in a couple seconds. You may argue that's luck. You may say that's because of Jaden Daniels' clutch gene, but it's going to be really interesting. How does it translate in these bigger games against bigger teams? I mean, I know they pulled it off against the Bucks. They pulled it off against the Eagles as well. Couple games like that here and there. But in playoff mode, divisional round, do you really want to rely on a win in the last couple seconds? And so those are the couple reasons I give it to Detroit. Of course, their home field advantage as well. But I do not count these Commanders out at all.
Well, listen, Chris, how many points do the Commanders need to score to win this game? Because I think this Detroit offense, especially right now,
38.
is just
At least 38.
really 38.
At least 38.
Wow.
I think
That's a fair bit above my margin. Not
the
much above
Lion,
my
the
margin, but
Lions are
that's
gonna. You probably have them at 32, and I think the Lions are gonna
around
go.
about.
The Lions will score at least 35, easily, because you have a couple Jamar Gibbs runs, you have a couple good passes downfield to Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've already got 20 points on the board.
Okay, Chris, so I will ask you then the question, what is the score then? I'm assuming a big score, or are you going to go the other way?
I have them 38-32 to the Lions. But if they want a fighting chance, they have to score at least 38 points. Anything below 30 points, the Commanders are not in the game. And
Yeah,
I'd love to get your thoughts on whether Jaden Daniels, if he pulls this win off, is he the greatest rookie of all time? I mean, do you think
I
he
think
has
so,
that
yes.
experience
Yes. If
to,
Jaden Daniels wins
really
this
do
game,
something
I
like
think
this?
so. If Jaden Daniels wins this game, I think yes.
Do
He
you think okay?
is
Do
the
you think
greatest
that
rookie season of all
do you
time.
think the Jaden Daniels run is going to be a really important factor in this game if they want to win?
Rushing the ball?
Yeah, Jaden
Um,
Daniels running the ball.
I think it's an important factor in most of their games, to be honest. And I think it's what
Hmm.
makes Jaden Daniels the quarterback that he is. So I definitely think it's going to be important. But I think the throwing aspect I think is going to be more important because Jaden Daniels needs to put points on the board, like you said. And I think that's probably going to come more from throwing the ball down the field than it is from him running. But I do expect Jaden Daniels to have like a good game. But I just think,
Because from what I'm looking at is he barely won against the Bucks and they did shut down his run. He had 13
mm,
carries for 36 yards. So I think it's a really interesting factor because like you said, it's important for him to run to win.
yes,
And
but
you know,
also when the game came down to it, he was able to run the ball to win the game. And that needs
mm,
to be noted too. He ran for that key 3rd and 1. Um,
right.
and I
That
think
is
that,
true.
and I think the
No,
other thing
I
is,
think that might have been a fourth and one because I
no, it
remember
was third
he.
and one.
Okay, what was the fourth down conversion that he had late game?
Oh, listen, I'm just trying to think back. He had one fourth down. He was 3 for 5 on 4th down. He had one on a which was a touchdown. Um, I'm just trying to think. I'm oh, you're really putting me on here. I just on the top of my head, I know the 3rd and 1 he had, um, which
Because
sealed the game.
I think it might have been a 38-yard completion. I'm not exactly too sure. Um,
I think I
but
know the one that you're talking about.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was to
it was a
Ertz.
critical play. But I think another thing that's going to be really interesting is how how aggressive are these teams going to be? It's going to be like two immovable, unstoppable forces coming against each other because you have Dan Quinn who loves going for it on fourth down, and what's his name? Dan Campbell also going unstoppable on the first down, fourth down. So
Yeah.
I think those are both going to become issues.
Yeah, there was the 4th and 2, the latest one in the game. I was right. It was 4th and 2 of the Tampa Bay 5, which was the touchdown to Terry McLaurin. That was with 9:40 left to go in the fourth quarter. He didn't have a 4th down conversion on that final drive. It was the third. It was the 3rd and 1,
Okay,
which sealed the game for them. But he
maybe
was
I'm getting
three.
a bit confused.
He was 3 for 5 on 4th down
Right.
throughout the game, and I think that's another thing that's going to come into play in this game is because both of these teams, I think Washington are actually more aggressive on 4th down than Detroit is, which is saying something
But
because that's
Luca,
Detroit's
I
brand of
also want to
football.
ask you what kind of questions will be drawn if Detroit loses? Where does Detroit go from here? Is it because they're too aggressive on fourth down? Is it because, the personnel issues? Because they have a really good lineup. I mean, where do you
If
go from here?
if they lose, I
Because
think
we know they choked a big lead last year.
if they lose, I think it is going to be because of the 4th down issues, Chris, because they live with it and they die by
Dive
it.
with it. Yep.
And that's just their brand of football. And they've hired Dan Campbell in. They hired Dan Campbell to fix the culture. He's done that. But this is the other side of the Dan Campbell sword is that for all the good he's done, I don't think it's going to come down to it. I have this game quite differently to how you see it. But if it does come down to Detroit losing, I think it is going to be because of their recklessness on 4th down, but they have to live with those decisions that Dan Campbell makes.
Mhm. That's fair.
Look, I think that this Detroit offense, I think, is just too much to handle. And similar to what we've said with the Chiefs, Detroit is one team that really, really, really benefits from having this bye with the amount of injuries they have, getting that defense back
Yeah,
into
getting
shape.
rested up. Yep.
I think it's just going to be too much for Jaden Daniels to handle. And we sort of saw it last year, and I said this in the previous episode, is we've seen this story before where a rookie quarterback comes off a historic season to face the 1 seed, and I think it's going to be competitive for a bit of the game, but I think in the second half, you're just going to see Detroit flex their muscles, and particularly with their ability to run the ball. Now that
Mm.
Montgomery's back, I just don't think you're going to be able to see this Washington Commanders offense keep up with the way that Detroit can just attack you with the passing game, and particularly with the running game, which Tampa Bay wasn't able to expose last week. I think Detroit will not have a hard time at all exposing this week. I have this game 34-21 to the Lions. I think that it's not going to be as close as you give it. And I think Jaden Daniels is just going to find himself in a spot where no matter what he does, it's just not going to be enough to propel them over the line against this team.
That's fair enough. I see it playing out potentially both ways. I mean, you're probably in the majority of people, but I think that it's very possible that both teams put insane amount of touchdowns on the board. It, regardless of what it is, it's going to be a really exciting game.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, Chris, I agree, and I'm excited to talk about this round of football next week once we've seen it all. We got two games on Sunday Australian time, which is Monday in America, and we have two more games on the Monday, which is Sunday in America. Then we have the college football national championship on Monday night in America, which is Tuesday here. Chris, I know you said you don't talk too much about college football, but I think for all my college football fans out there, this is the year for Ohio State to finally break through. Notre Dame's got a lot to offer, but I think Ohio State has been begging for an opportunity like this, and I think they will be absolutely filthy if they do not come away with a win in the national championship. I'm giving Ohio State, Notre Dame, my official score prediction. I'm going 31-24 to Ohio State and for the Buckeyes to win the national championship. Chris, you have any comments at all? I know you might not have any. Do you have any thoughts on these two teams?
All I know is Ohio State doesn't make good NFL quarterbacks, so
That is true, but listen,
that's what I know.
they got a lot of ballers on that Ohio State offense, okay? And Notre Dame is a very well coached team. They have a very good defense, but I think this Ohio State team is going to be able to find a way to win. But I'm giving Ohio State as my official college football pick. So for those of my college football fans out there, I'm interested to hear your thoughts and how this game goes.
Luca,
But
do you have any betting locks for the entire one lock?
oh, yeah, that's a
Any
good
props?
question. Yes,
props?
yes, I do. Give me DeAndre Hopkins anytime touchdown
Wow,
scorer.
okay.
That is what
Okay.
I'm going with.
Okay, that was a bit left field.
No, DeAndre Hopkins anytime touchdown scorer against his old team. Look, I would be tempted. I probably wouldn't do it as a same game multi, but as a separate in that pick, I would also want to put Travis Kelce down as an anytime touchdown scorer.
Oh,
Because
that's another
he
thing
is
I
he
wanted
is
to talk
going for
about.
he's going for some records.
Luca,
So
Luca,
that's my other thing
in my
I would
honest
do.
opinion, if Travis Kelce does not have a big game this round, the Chiefs are finished.
Really, I think he can
The
put
Chiefs
it.
are finished.
I
Because
don't think he needs to have a
what
big
has
game.
happened is this hype has been created that Travis Kelce's coming, he's gonna emerge in form, he's saving up, he's got a couple games left. If he doesn't show up now when they need him, I think the only reason the Chiefs were able to get back in the game in the last Super Bowl and the Eagles Super Bowl was because Travis Kelce was an extra threat and drew the defense away. If they know that Travis Kelce is unable to produce, that's another weapon neutralized on a team that's already depleted of weapons.
Yes, I get that, Chris, but if the score is what you say it is and the score's 27-7, do they really need Kelsey for this game?
I'm talking about looking forward. I think it's good to just get Kelce some reps anyway.
Yeah, well, I think Kelsey's going to have a big game, but I don't think they need him to. I don't think if he doesn't have a big game, they're finished. I think he could easily have an all-right game and then in the championship game come back to Travis Kelsey. I think that could happen. But
All right.
yeah,
Yep.
if I'm having two bets, I would have one bet DeAndre Hopkins anytime touchdown scorer, Travis Kelsey anytime touchdown scorer,
I'm
and for my
taking,
hardcore punters out there, you could put the two into one. That would be a nice little payday. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Josh Allen anytime rushing touchdown, and I'm taking AJ Brown Anytime touchdown. Easy. I think Josh
Fair
Allen's gonna
enough.
be. I think Josh Allen's gonna be Superman, and he always gets a rushing touchdown when he's Superman.
And also
So,
the Ravens to win outright as well. I think is another good bet for all
I
of my
mean, you have a good
fans.
return, yeah, so it's not bad.
Yeah, look, well, the Ravens' odds have actually, it's hard to explain in American terms because the odds work differently, but they both started out it was $1.90, $1.92 at the start of the week, Chris, and now the Ravens have moved all the way down to $1.84. I haven't actually checked today. They could actually be even shorter than that. But I thought that was something that's interesting. They just keep creeping down and down and down. But the points stay the same, which I think they will. But Chris, any final words before we do head off today?
I think we had an interesting discussion here, a lot of very pertinent points. I think we definitely pointed out a couple key factors. And I think a lot of the things we discussed are going to have really big flow-on effects into the championship games. So I think we should keep a keen eye on how Lamar plays in that Bills-Ravens game particularly, and how Detroit shows up, and also um, what happens with the Eagles. Does Jalen Hurts sort of disappear again, or does he show up? So I think those are really key points that will have definitely big effects later on in the playoffs.
Yeah, completely agree, Chris. A lot on the line this weekend, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. But that is all, everyone, for Priceless Takes episode 68, Divisional Round Preview, NFL 24-25 season. As always, Chris, thank you for joining me. I appreciated your insight, and I'm interested to see how our predictions turn out for next week.
Thanks, Luca. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms, guys. Instagram and TikTok, both at the handle at Priceless Takes. Both will be posted in the description below. As for next week, we will see you then for our post-divisional round episode and championship round preview. But I am your host, Luca Price. Thank you for tuning in to Priceless Takes, and we will see you next time. Go the Ravens! Come
Go
on,
Eagles.
Lamar. Let's go. See you later, guys.